The night started with laughter, but the laughter did not stay harmless for long. Donald Trump had spent the day talking about cognitive tests, bragging that he had aced them, and repeating the same old story about perfect memory, perfect sharpness, and perfect instincts. By evening, Desi Lydic and Jimmy Kimmel had turned those clips into something he could not outrun: a mirror. Desi opened first. She stood behind her desk with one image frozen over her shoulder, Trump describing a test like it was the final exam for civilization. He talked about animals, memory words, easy questions, hard questions, and how nobody else could perform the way he performed. The clip rolled just long enough for the audience to hear him say the examples, pause, search, and then land on the squirrel like America had been waiting for that answer. Desi watched calmly. Then she said, "I am relieved. In a crisis, I want a leader who can look at an alligator and say, 'Not squirrel.'" The studio broke open, but she did not let the joke become the whole segment. She leaned forward and said cognitive screenings are real tools, and families dealing with memory concerns deserve respect. The funny part was not the test. The funny part was a powerful man turning a basic screening into a gold medal and then demanding applause for passing the first question. That made the room quiet enough to listen. Desi put 4 animal cards on the desk: lion, bear, alligator, squirrel. Then she added 3 more: giraffe, whale, shark. She said the animals in Trump's stories seemed to change depending on the day, but the ending never changed. Every version ended with Trump declaring himself perfect. One day the test was about memory. Another day it sounded like a zoo roll call. Another day it became proof that every critic was low IQ. She said, "At this point the animals are not testing him. They are trying to escape the monologue." The audience roared. Then the screen shifted to a children's fitness event. The setting should have been safe and simple: children, health, exercise, maybe a few lines about running outside, eating better, and putting down the phone. Instead, Trump drifted into nuclear weapons, Iran, old grievances, political attacks, and the kind of heavy topics that made the children on screen look like they had accidentally wandered into a national security briefing during gym class. Desi let the awkwardness sit. Then she said, "Nothing says youth fitness like stretching before the apocalypse." The laughter hit again, but this time it had an edge. Desi's point was obvious. Trump wanted the country to believe he was focused, sharp, and in control. But the footage showed him turning a kids' event into a detour through every subject except kids and fitness. A man bragging about focus had lost the room while standing in front of children. That was the first mini payoff. Desi had taken a boast and made it a question. Not whether Trump could identify a squirrel, but whether he could identify the room he was in. Before the story cooled, Jimmy Kimmel picked up the second half from his own stage. He did not start with animals. He started with construction. A video played of Trump praising a new White House ballroom project, describing it as beautiful, necessary, and privately funded. He spoke with that familiar confidence, the kind that makes every promise sound simple before the details arrive. Kimmel waited until the clip ended, then turned toward the audience and said, "The man who turned a cognitive test into a trophy is now turning a ballroom into a math problem." The audience laughed because they already knew where it was going. Kimmel explained the rhythm. First, Trump sells the idea as clean and easy. It will be beautiful. It will cost what he says. Donors will handle it. Nobody should worry. Then, as questions rise about security, expenses, public resources, and what taxpayers may indirectly carry, the promise becomes less simple. Suddenly, there is fine print. Suddenly, the number has legs. Suddenly, asking who pays becomes an attack. Kimmel placed a mock invoice on the desk. He said, "There is nothing more Trump than promising billionaires will pay for something, then somehow the taxpayer feels a hand reaching for his wallet." The room exploded. That was the second mini payoff. Desi had shown the test contradiction. Kimmel showed the governing contradiction. One was about public image. The other was about public cost. Together, they made the same argument. Trump is at his strongest when he is selling the first version of a story. The trouble begins when somebody replays the second, third, and fourth version back to back. Then Kimmel connected the segments. He said the cognitive test, the children's event, and the ballroom all came from the same machine. The machine creates a claim, decorates it with confidence, attacks anyone who asks for details, and then complains that late night is unfair when the clips are placed in order. The audience clapped because the pattern was now visible. Desi returned in a split-screen replay, saying Trump does not have a comedy problem. He has a pause button problem. As long as a clip can be paused, rewound, and played beside the next clip, the performance has nowhere to hide. Kimmel added, "Comedy does not invent the contradiction. It just circles it in red marker." That line landed hard. Then came the part that kept the story alive: Trump's reaction. In this dramatized version, the post came fast. Desi was desperate. Kimmel was talentless. Late night was dying. Networks were failing. Nobody watched. Nobody cared. The usual insults arrived with the usual confidence, but they created the usual problem. If nobody watched, why did he know what they said? If they were irrelevant, why respond before the jokes even cooled? If late night was dead, why keep writing the obituary in all caps? Desi read the reaction slowly, like a teacher reading a student's excuse note. She said, "He says late night is dead, but he keeps attending the funeral and arguing with the corpse." The audience could barely recover. Kimmel followed with his own closer. He said Trump has the rare political gift of proving a joke right while complaining about the joke. Every insult became extra footage. Every angry post became a sequel. Every demand that networks be ashamed made the original segment feel less like comedy and more like evidence. For older viewers watching at home, the meaning was not complicated. They had seen men in power create a mess, then blame the people who noticed the mess. They had seen bosses dodge questions by attacking the worker who asked them. They had seen politicians promise one thing, explain another thing, and then call the public unfair for remembering both. Desi and Kimmel were not asking people to believe a rumor. They were asking them to watch a sequence. Clip 1. Trump brags about mental sharpness. Clip 2. Trump turns a children's event into a strange political maze. Clip 3. Trump sells a ballroom as simple and privately funded. Clip 4. Questions appear. Clip 5. Comedians replay the contradiction. Clip 6. Trump reacts so loudly that the contradiction gets a second life. That sequence was the whole story. And once the audience saw it, the jokes became sharper because the jokes were attached to footage. Desi did not need to imagine a version of Trump who sounded scattered. She played the children event. Kimmel did not need to invent a version of Trump who sells easy promises and complicated bills. He played the ballroom clip. Neither of them needed secret documents. Trump's own public appearances did the heavy lifting. That was why the rage looked so bad. Trump wanted to dismiss them as failures, but his attention made them look powerful. He wanted to say nobody cared, but his reaction made millions care. He wanted to call them talentless, but their timing made his anger the punchline. The more emotional he became, the calmer they looked. The more he shouted about ratings, the more viewers replayed the exact clips he wanted buried. Then Desi delivered the line that turned the room. "Donald, the real cognitive test is not whether you can find the squirrel. It is whether you can stop feeding the comedians." The audience stood. Kimmel looked at the camera and added, "And right now, he is failing extra credit." The laughter rolled for several seconds, but the segment did not end there. Kimmel softened his voice and said the serious issue is not whether a politician gets roasted on television. That happens every week. The serious issue is whether a leader can handle criticism without trying to punish the people who laughed. A free country needs jokes. It needs replay. It needs citizens who can look at power and say, "That does not make sense." Desi nodded in the replay and said the same thing in her own style. The problem is not that comedians are unfair. The problem is that a confident leader should not be terrified of a punchline made from his own words. That line shifted the energy from comedy to recognition. The final screen showed 3 words: claim, clip, reaction. Kimmel said the order matters because Trump often loses control at the third step. The claim is his. The clip is public. The reaction is the confession. If he ignored it, the joke might fade. But when he attacks, threatens, complains, and names every host, he turns the joke into a national conversation. Desi closed with a small smile. "He keeps saying nobody watches," she said, "but he always shows up for the recap." The audience laughed one last time. By the end of the night, the segments had become more than late-night jokes. They became a lesson in modern politics. A single boast becomes a clip. The clip becomes a joke. The joke becomes a headline. The headline becomes an angry response. Then the response becomes proof that the joke landed. That loop is what Trump could not escape. He was furious because Desi Lydic and Jimmy Kimmel did not just mock him. They organized him. They took the animals, the children, the ballroom, the posts, the complaints, and the contradictions, then arranged them so viewers could see the machinery. For a man built on image, that is more dangerous than any insult. The real humiliation was not one punchline. It was the pattern. Trump said he was sharp. The clips asked about focus. Trump promised simplicity. The costs raised questions. Trump said nobody watched. His own reaction promoted the show. By the end, his anger had done what comedians dream of. It gave their jokes a second broadcast, a bigger audience, and a perfect ending. That is why the audience stood, not just because Desi was funny or Kimmel was sharp, but because the truth had become easy to follow. Trump tried to control the story with noise. Desi and Kimmel controlled it with replay. And in a television age where every word can be paused, clipped, and played again, the calmest people in the room are often the ones holding the most dangerous weapon, the tape. And that made the ending stronger than a normal roast. Viewers were not asked to pick a political team. They were asked to notice a rhythm any honest person could recognize. Brag first, drift second, promise third, deny fourth, attack fifth, repeat forever. Desi gave the rhythm a face. Kimmel gave it a receipt. Together, they made the story simple enough for the audience to remember and sharp enough for Trump to hate. The biggest punchline was not the squirrel, the ballroom, or the angry post. The biggest punchline was that the man demanding credit for perfect focus could not stop proving he was focused on the comedians. That final contradiction gave the entire night its most unforgettable sting for viewers.